The member for Timiskaming Cochrane.
Thank you, Speaker. It's always an honour to be able to rise in this House and speak on any issue, but it's especially an honour to be able to speak on Bill 161. It's an agricultural issue, and actually it's pretty well a dairy issue in a lot of cases. I'd like to commend the member for bringing it forward. And before I get too far in my ramblings, I'd like to say we've all got to push, because this bill, something the same, has been brought forward many years ago, and it should have been implemented by the government, and this one is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take much more than just here today to get this done. And one of the reasons why this issue has trouble getting traction, the first time I heard about it was when I started dairy farming 30 years ago. I've been a dairy farmer for 30 years, retired 4 years ago. And the first piece of resistance you get on this issue is from the electrical community, from an electrician. When you start explaining, what happens on some farms, no, that can't be. And what makes it a really tricky issue, it doesn't happen on all farms to the same degree. And that makes it an incredibly tricky issue. Before I go far, I'd like to welcome our guests here and thank you for taking the time to come here. But that's what makes it a tricky issue. So it's an easy one to explain away. And we've had these issues in my riding. I come from Timiskaming Cochrane. There's about 50 dairy farms around New Liskeard. And I've had these, it's wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he's not managing this correctly, or she's not doing this correctly, or, But farmers know. And what's really frustrating to the farm community is whenever we do something, we put a piece on the barn, or everything has to be up to code. So everything's up to code, but the electrical supply coming in and leaving isn't up to code. That's the most frustrating thing. And what we found in my little part of the world, I'm no expert. I made my living milking cows. I'm not an electrician. We had a farm electrician. He's still a farm electrician, Jean Caron. We all call him Johnny Light. And he saved a lot of our bacon because he'd come to understand. He still does a lot of the electrical work in our area, and he'd come to understand certain things cause troubles and certain things seem to work. One thing where we had a lot of trouble is we live in an old glacial lake basin, and if you dig 4 feet down, it's water. And our farm barns used to be all built on floating pads, floating foundations. Wow. And when the ground froze, they went up and they went down. But that no longer works for code. You have to dig 8 feet down. And we have way more trouble with, and you can call whatever kind of, because I don't even pretend to know what the difference between current and voltage. I just know that there's certain electricity you got to avoid, and that caused huge problems. And again, nobody really knew that. We had to learn that the hard way. Something else that seems to cause more troubles is if you build a big new barn with a steel structure. But nobody told, and these are great structures. That's the way to build a barn. I remember when the first one went up in my riding, I was still farming, and I have an old wooden barn, and oh boy, I walked in this place. I like that barn better than I like this building. It was, it was a nice barn.
It's the content, John.
But it turned out, and the farmers there, they're very progressive, but they've gone through thousands of dollars and hours to try and get this fixed. Guess what? The newer barns are going up in our area are wood framed. But why does the agricultural community have to learn that themselves through the school of hard knocks when we all know that this issue exists? And that is the most frustrating thing. And that's why I commend Mr. Nichols, and I commend Maria van Bommel for bringing this forward the first time. And I'm gonna chastise the government a little bit, because they have been the government for more than a decade, and they know this exists. And again, the reason why that this problem isn't being moved on that quick is when the people on the government side, and they're not bad people. I disagree with them a lot, but they're not bad people. They will go to their experts, to the electrical community, and the electrical community will tell them, well, nah, really, it's not that bad. Because look, there's a lot of very productive farms, and there are, but it's an individual issue. It's an issue that has to be solved. And why? And it's an issue more than in just dairy, but it's the easiest to identify in dairy. And I get a little bit, offended is the wrong word, upset when I hear this about dancing cows. This is a hard issue to explain to other people because you think of dancing cows and they're thinking what, they're hip hop or they're no. And the real problem is if the cows, if the stray voltage was a matter of the cows standing in the milking parlor and getting electrocuted and falling down dead, that'd actually be better. Because then you'd have to figure out what happened. But that's not what happens. Those cows are irritated for months, for years, and that causes chronic ailments, which ends up killing them. And it also ends up killing the farm family, financially, and in other ways. But certainly the stress is, and that's why. And why you can measure it in dairy is because we measure all kinds of things in milk, right? So the somatic cell count, somatic cells are white blood cells in the milk, and when a cow is under stress, more of these blood cells will come to fight whatever is stressing it. And they test that. Every time you ship milk, they test somatic cell count. And the higher that count goes, tells you there's a problem. And that's one of the initial things. You've got a somatic cell count that you can't control. Despite all the management things you're employing, you can't control. That's telling you there's a problem. But it's not universal across all farms. And that's what this government has to remember. When somebody in the electrical system says, oh, no, it's not a problem because we've got 5,000 farms working perfectly, and this couple hundred over here, they've got, no. It's a much deeper issue, and I, urge this government to actually work with all of us and get this fixed. Thank you.